Aloha, everyone. Let's get started. Ooh, Dr. Pauline, sweet. Just got back from the Philippines. Well, welcome back. Let's get started. I drove into the office so that I should be able to do the webcam. Sometimes at home, I don't got a good shot at the webcam here, so let's see if you guys are able to see me. Oh, there I am. Hey there. I'm in my office here in Kona and just enjoying the sunset. So in a few minutes, the sun is going to be blasting me straight in the face. I have a beautiful view of the ocean and the beach. And in the wintertime, the sun comes blasting right through in that window. And so if as I do this webinar, all of a sudden I'm like squinting from this side, you guys got to forgive me. I live in what you would call the boonies, and Kailua Kona is the boonies, but I live even further out of Kona. And for those of you that are from Kona or have ever been here, I live in the middle of nowhere. And the internet where I live is, it's a politically correct term. It sucks. And I was actually on the phone with Hawaiian Tel saying, can you give me a little bit more speed? And they did for about 10 minutes. And then it dropped back down to normal. So I shaved, put on an Aloha shirt, drove into town just to hang out with you guys. So let's get started. I want to make sure that we use our time wisely. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is dealing with negativity. We're going to be talking about a question that I get a lot. Now, for those of you that have never been on our webinar before, I want to set a little bit of kind of like an overview of what we're going to do. First of all, please forgive my voice. If I sound a little bit raspy, my kids started going to a new school, and in a new school, they get introduced to new bugs. And my daughter came home with an amazing cold. And you know me, I take my vitamins, I exercise regularly. I'm like, strong like bull. And sure enough, it hit me just a little bit, just enough so that my voice is just a little bit raspy. And I'll do my best. If anything, I'll hit mute, drink some water, jump right back in the game with you guys. But we're here to have some fun. So first of all, for those of you who have never joined us before on a webinar, here's kind of how we're going to go with it. I'm going to do an overview of what we're talking about and help to kind of paint the picture to set the tone for what we're going to be going over during this webinar. A lot of the webinars that we do come from things that you guys request. So every once in a while, we'll do a poll during a webinar and say, hey, what do you guys want to learn about? What do you guys want to talk about? We'll throw out some options. And dealing with negativity is one that when I teach my trainings, I get a lot of questions about that. How do I deal with negative people? How do I deal with negativity around me? I'm getting clearer in my focus. And the people that I'm around, as much as I love them, they only want to talk about negative stuff. They only want to share with me the things that are going wrong in their life. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with the fact that I want to talk about positive things? This is a huge question that I get. So that's a topic that we're covering tonight. I'm from Hawaii. I'm not from this island. I'm on the big island right now. I'm in Kona. I'm from Oahu, a smaller island that is, I think it's in that direction over there. And one of the things that we like to do is we like to give back. And so I'm very grateful that you guys are here. So I usually have some sort of free download and something for those of you that want to spend a little bit, even an offer on a product and whatnot. There's no reason why you need to do any of that. If you're just here for the information, you don't even want the free download, then the bulk of this is going to be all about the presentation. It's going to be all about the content and what we're talking about. And that way we stay on point. And at the end, when we wrap up, I'm going to say, hey, here's a free download for you if you'd like. Just kind of our way of giving back, saying thank you very much for the time and taking the time to be here. And then what we'll do is we'll finish up. We'll wrap up. We usually go about an hour. A little bit more than that. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I always like to save time for a Q&A, which also brings me another important point. I have Chelsea on the call with me. Chelsea's on with me, and she's one of our team members here at the Empowerment Partnership, and she's going to help field some of the questions. If at any point during the presentation you have a question, you just throw it in there. If Chelsea can handle it, she will. If not, when it gets towards the end, I'm just going to look through them, and I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can to get through as many as I can. For those of you that have never been with us before, I also want to point out we are on Facebook. Sorry if I look over here every once in a while. I got a second monitor. so that I'm able to see what you guys are able to see. We're on Facebook, so if you want to connect with us on Facebook, facebook.com/empowerment partnership. And my personal Facebook page is facebook.com/Dr. Matt James. I think if you type in Dr. Matt, I show up somewhere on the top, and you'd be able to find me there. If you don't like Facebook, I think there's 7 billion people on Facebook, which means that you're the one person holding out. No, but anyway, seriously. Then there are other ways to connect with us as well. We have my blog, and on my blog, you have a lot of links to the other things. I'm a regular blogger on Psychology Today, a regular blogger on Huffington Post. You can find those links there. And that's a separate database. drmatt.com is a separate database from the Empowerment Partnership, meaning that if you want to know when I put a new article up, if you want to know when I put a new blog up, talk about research and whatnot, that's where you want to go. And you want to make sure that you sign in for that so that you get notices. We don't do any advertising from drmatt.com. NLP.com is our main page. NLP.com is our company page, and that's where we do all of the emails about our upcoming events. So you also want to make sure that you're there as well at NLP.com. And if you have any questions before, during, after, well, obviously not before because it would be too late, you can email me at drmatt@nlp.com. That does get screened by our office, and if they can handle the question, they handle it. If not, sometimes they shoot it up to me. And I see people on this list that I've actually gotten on the phone and talked to. I do that every once in a while if your question is complicated enough. And what we're talking about today, though, let's jump into it because I want to make sure we use as much time as we can. We're talking about negativity. And so there's a few things that I want to go over first. And I want to share with you that no matter how far down the path you get, no matter how much you teach, I've been doing NLP since I was 11. I mean, I started meditating when I was 5. I started learning Huna and Ho'oponopono in my early teenage years. I've been doing this for a long time. And I want to be really clear. I think people are amazing, and you run into situations that no matter what you do, you experience negativity. One of my dear friends, she is an amazing woman. I have known her for years. There was a point where every time she would call me, it was like no matter where the topic began, we would end up getting to a place of how awful the world is, how terrible it is, and how this is happening and that's happening. And I would sit there and I would go, oh, man, I want to talk about some happy things. And I would go to change the subject, and we would get diverted back. We'd get diverted back. And there were some things that I had to do internally first that I'm going to share with you. And there were also some things that I needed to do with regards to my communication with her. And we'll talk about that as well, because I was able to help the situation out and to make a difference in our relationship. This is someone that I've known for years. And at one point, I finally just had to say to her, look, I love talking to you, and I want to be able to spend some time talking about happy things too. But before I had to open my mouth and say that, I wanted to make sure I was in a positive space. You're not always in a positive space, though, when you do stuff. And I'm the president of a board for a local school here. And the name of the school is Hulalai Academy. For those of you that follow me on Facebook, as you know, we were doing everything we could. I've been running the board for a year. And after years of running at a deficit, this year, the new head of school that I brought in, we just weren't able to turn around. And it was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking for both of us and for the faculty and the staff and some people that have been a part of this school forever, from the beginning. The lady who founded it, I helped to bring her back on the board as well as getting her to be a part of the office again. And it was just heartbreaking, absolutely. I had to be the messenger. Yeah, you ever heard the term, don't shoot the messenger? Sometimes when you have that idea of don't shoot the messenger, please forgive me, I'm just going to move my phone over. I forgot to put it over here just in case Chelsea has to text message me if there's any internet difficulties or whatnot. If you've ever heard the term don't shoot the messenger, it's the knee-jerk reflex that the person who delivers the message becomes the target. Well, as the president of the board, I had to be the person that shared with everyone, our beloved school is closing down. And the feedback was across the board. I had people on one side giving me positive Thank you for doing everything you could. My God, you've put in more time than I've known anyone. And then you have people on the total other side that basically believed that it was my fault, or the head that we had, his fault, and just about as negative as you could ever imagine. Our head of school received some emails that he just flat out refused to read to me out of respect for me. And the unfortunate side of it was that our kids began to take heat in the school, because both of our kids have been going there ever since we moved to Kona. And we had to make a decision. How are we going to handle all of this? How are we going to deal with the situation? Because there was so much negativity, yet balancing out by the positive. I felt pretty good. And as my kids began to feel the pressure, we had to make some decisions. And we had to make some very difficult decisions. And one of the decisions we had to make was taking our kids out of the school and taking action with that. And how do you then respond to this negativity? Because most of these people don't know what I teach. They don't look at me and view what I do from your guys' perspective. I'm the guy running the board. I'm the president of the board, and I'm the messenger that said your beloved school of close to 20 years is shutting down. So all of this is, no matter how far you get down the path, I'm sharing these things with you, not to impress you, but to impress upon you that no matter what you do, no matter how much you learn, you're going to encounter situations where you're dealing with negativity. So let's start off with some basic ideas. From an NLP perspective, from a Huna perspective, there are quote unquote bad people. Now, bad is your label. I want to be really clear. Bad, I don't think people are inherently good or bad. I think that's a value judgment. I think we each determine what we believe is good and what we believe is bad. And yes, I know NLP, and yes, I believe in the idea that people are not their behaviors, and individuals are doing the best they can with the resources they have. I also believe from a Huna perspective that everybody's a being of light. You see, I said this one time in a training. I said in a training that the person that taught my father, Papa Beret, who shared the lineage of Huna that I teach, we're about to do our 48th Huna workshop that starts next week. Wow. Starts next week. 24 years here in Kona teaching Huna. And one of the things that the person who taught my father said, there are people out there in the world, if given the opportunity, will do harm to other individuals. Sometimes people get up on stage and I hear them saying, everyone's a being of light. Hold on. I had the student come up to me and say, you just said that there are people that will do harm to others. How can you claim you're a spiritual teacher? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, my teacher says everyone's a being of light. And I said, I never said people aren't a being of light. There are beings of light that don't do anything with that light inside, using light as a metaphor, as an analogy. There are people that have, step back, everyone has light in them. Not everyone's doing something with it. So let's be really clear. Sometimes the problem isn't with you. I'm going to address it when it is with you, and how do you handle that, and what are some specific things that you can do. But let's get really clear for a moment. There are some people that, if given the opportunity, are going to do harm to others, are going to spout out negativity, and as soon as you recognize that and realize, yes, they're a being of light, what they believe is right, what they believe is wrong is just different than what I believe. I have to be congruent, the Hawaiian word is pono, right, with what I believe. And that's a lot of what I want to share with you today. How do you get right with what you believe? How do you weed out, this is the other person's stuff, this is my stuff? Because if it's your stuff, you have to learn how to deal with it. If it's someone else's stuff, then there's a whole nother way of dealing with it. So let's jump in and let's define negativity from a Huna, from a NLP perspective. The first thing that I want to bring up is this idea that perception is projection. It should say projection, not just project. Perception is project. No, perception is projection. It's a Jungian concept. It's the idea that what we carry inside flavors and affects all of the things that are outside of us. For those of you that have been to my events, and those of you that have been to my trainings, we talk about this extensively right in the beginning of every single training. If you've never been to one, I think we have a previous webinar on this. You could probably go to drmatt.com, see if there's a link there. I know I've written blogs about this idea. My third book just came out, which is the second in a series of 3 books that deal with How do you reconcile this? The book that came out is about the shadow. How do you reconcile your shadow? This idea that what we carry inside, we put out onto the world around us. And what I mean by that is that there are different viewpoints. Let me simplify this. Never mind the whole Jungian shadow, none of that. Let's keep it simple. One person's pain can be another person's pleasure. One person's tragedy can be another person's celebration. We were teaching Huna September 11th, when September 11th occurred. And the night before, on September 10th, I taught about perception as projection. I taught about cause and effect, about mind body, and I hammered it home. I absolutely I was very direct. And we wake up the next morning to September 11th, a tragedy. And one of the early images that I remember are people in New York embracing each other, and just the outpouring of grief and shock and fear and the negative emotions that were coming up. And they zoom and go over to another part of the planet. And I'm not meaning this in any negative way, shape, or form. I've traveled the globe. I love all the places I've been to. You see pictures of people celebrating the tragedy. And you see that no matter where it occurs. You see the U.S. going to war and invading, and you see celebration on one side and tragedy on the other. And I don't mean to bring up any sensitive topics. Please forgive me for that. Let me be really clear what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this idea that we all have different viewpoints. So what you might think is positive, another person might think is negative. So let's start off with a really simple idea. There is no universal good or bad. There's no universal positive or negative. We have to be able to weed out what is my issue and what is another person's issue. Because there are certain instances where the issue lies with the other individual. And then there are certain instances where the issue lies with you. And then that helps you to determine what you're going to do with the situation. So let's just go with a simple idea here. Different people have perspectives on different things. There are some people that believe what you're doing is positive, and there are some people that believe what you're doing is negative. And there's no way around that. The next thing that we want to talk about is negativity from baggage. Baggage. Oh, I've done webinars on this, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. It's that idea that we carry anger, sadness, fear, guilt, limiting decisions, baggage that we hold on to that can accumulate, that if you don't let it go, that this baggage begins to speak through you. A person who has buried a lot of anger, when they see a situation outside of them, they may look at it and become frustrated with it. A person who has a lot of anger, an example that I use in my trainings is that I get up on stage and sometimes I get so passionate about a topic. And there was one training, it was in Toronto. There was a training in Toronto that I was teaching. And this one lady comes up to me and she says, I need you to kind of tone it back a notch. And I went, okay, I'm sorry. I said, my bad. I said, too much energy? She said, no, too aggressive. And I went, oh, I said, from my heart, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And before I could finish the sentence, there was another lady standing right to the other side. And she turns to this lady who just said I was being aggressive and said, what are you talking about? And these two ladies face each other, and the lady to my left, she goes, I have never seen anyone so passionate, so motivated, and just loving. How dare you call him aggressive? And then the lady who called me aggressive starts telling her, well, you must have a different idea of what passion is because he's clearly aggressive and I think he has repressed anger. And these two people are arguing over who I am. I didn't feel like I was being overly motivated, or maybe there was passion there. I think maybe in that instance I was really excited about what I was talking about. Two different people viewed it in two totally different ways. You could say this lady who was viewing what I'm doing as anger, that my actions, my communication brought up her baggage. Sometimes your goals can bring up people's baggage. If I was taught, see, I'm used to teaching a live group. This is where I would look out at the group and go, how many of you have ever set a goal and one of your dearest friends goes and tries to just tear your goal apart? Hands go up. I'm staring at a camera. I'm staring at a small little dot with a green light next to it. I'm used to teaching with groups. So back to webinar. So these individuals, they hear that you have this goal. They hear that you want to do something. and they'll say the most awful things sometimes. And when I was in Australia, they had a term for this. I was teaching in Melbourne, I think, Andoni, I think that was the practitioner training you were at. And one of my haumana, one of my students, her name is Felicia. And Felicia was there, and she was so kind. She said, as an American, she said, you did really well in your Australia training. And I was like, thank you. I said, could you clarify what that means? And she said, well, sometimes in Australia, if you attempt to excel, she said, we have what's called the tall poppy. And that should say poppy, not pappy. Blah. I was doing the slides really fast. Sorry about that. Tall poppy syndrome. And I said, what the heck's a tall poppy? And she said, you have this field, and one of the trees, one of the branches, one of the things that you're growing tries to stand up tall. And she said, sometimes it's easier to cut that down than everyone else growing. And I went, that's an unfortunate yet beautiful analogy of, I remember telling one of my close friends, I used to weigh 85 pounds more than I do right now. And I said, that's it. I'm done being unhealthy. I'm done with this. And my behaviors changed. And I began changing my behavior, and I started losing weight. And he started arguing with me. What was wrong with you to begin with? Why would you want to go and change things? And later on, he openly admitted that he was dealing with his own weight and health issues. And you know what? It's easier to tear someone down than to build yourself up. So sometimes when you're looking at the negativity, it could be coming from baggage where this person is hurt. This person is not experiencing the world that they want to be experiencing. And to see you experiencing it, or you having some level of happiness, it can sometimes cause a negative reaction. And the more you let go of your baggage, the more you become pono with yourself. Sometimes you see individuals that are hurting more than trying to tear you down, that what they're experiencing is so heavy that they have no way of verbalizing it. And you can experience that as well with regards to negativity. So there's all these things that we have to weed through. There's all these things that we have to talk about. And I want to give you some clear things that you can do to help you deal with these negative experiences in your life. So here's a simple way. Now, before I get into some specific tips that you can do, I want to be really clear. On this call, I have people that work with the company, that have done practitioner with me, that have done Huna with me, that have done Masterclass. I see that we have some trainers on here that have done all of the events that we have. And then I can also see some names that I don't recognize at all. And my guess is you have never done any trainings. I'm going to give tips across the board. I'm going to give some tips so that whether or not you are a trainer of NLP, only did a practitioner with me, or have only listened to webinars, or heck, even the newbie who's never experienced any of this, you can walk away with it. For those of you that have never done any NLP, yeah, I'm going to talk about some techniques that you can do, and hopefully one day you find someone that you want to take an NLP training with and get these techniques to help you out. And so let's go through this. The first thing that I found very easy for people to do, here's what you do about it. The first thing that you want to do is begin to make a list of the things that trigger you, that hook you. Hook means maybe someone tells you something about your hair and it never bothers you. Yeah, I got a short haircut this time. I think someone actually put that on there on one of the things as I was reading through. Whoa, you got a short haircut. And usually my hair is a little bit longer. So what? Doesn't bother me. But I've met other people that you make one comment about their hair, about what they're wearing. It's like this hook goes in them and they're emotionally drawn in by that. So what hooks you? What hooks you may not hook other people. So the first thing is find out, where's your hook? Where are the things that grab you and kind of begin to derail you, the things that throw you off? The higher up you get in a position, the more responsibility you want, the more you have to identify your hooks and find a way to totally disconnect them. I have here, then you chunk up. For those of you who've never done NLP, it's look at it from a big picture, look at it from a broader perspective. And what you're looking for is a theme or a pattern. What is a theme that is occurring here? What is a pattern that happens? You know, it's about my hair one time, and the next time it's my partner talking about the shirt that I'm wearing, and the next time is someone, okay, so maybe it's body image. You're looking for the bigger picture. What is it? Maybe it's tone of voice. My daughter, when she was younger, could hit this tone when she was crying that would just, yeah, you just like, I wanted to come out of my skin and go, what's wrong with this child? And I don't know what it was. And I remember we were in the doctor's office, and my daughter let one of those out. And granted, it was she was getting a shot, so I'm not holding it against her. She just hit the tone though, and I'm like, wow, what is that? And I looked at the doctor, Dr. Nakamura, and I'm like, dude, how do you not come unglued with these kids crying? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know. I just don't even notice it anymore. It's like, how do you not notice that right there? And he looks down at my daughter and he goes, oh, that's nothing. I can tell you kids that screamed way louder than this. And he's helping me look at it from a different perspective. And I got to tell you that I began to realize that when a certain tone of voice is hit, when someone's talking to me, when someone is giving me feedback, and this is like 7 years ago now, this is 6, 7 years ago, that when someone would hit a certain tone of voice, oh, something would come up inside me. So that person talking to me may not be negative in that moment. Their tone of voice makes me perceive it as being negative. I hope that made sense to you guys. Let me say this again. Because sometimes people come up to you and they're just honestly needing to tell you something, and their tone of voice is their tone of voice. That's just the way it goes. But you might have an reaction to that tone of voice, think that what they're doing is negative, and then react to it as if it were negative. Well, then it's your stuff. And I immediately recognized that for some reason, the tone of voice would sometimes bring up these emotions in me. I'll get to what you do with that in just a moment. But I want to give you an example. Tone of voice. Tone of voice is an example. I was teaching in San Jose. I'll give you another example. I was teaching in San Jose last month, and a lady came up to me, and she said, I just want to let you know that I have way more rapport with Nicholas, the guy that co-teaches with me, she said, than you. She said, I actually am not liking you at all. So I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. What was your name? Because she didn't even introduce herself. And if you're on here right now, or if you're ever watching this, I loved the interaction because your next thing was very powerful. She said that there was a certain behavior that I did, just something that I did while I was on stage. Could have been my tone of voice, could have been, who knows, the way I said something, a key phrase or something. And she said, and you know what? When I hear you say that, my boss does the same thing and I can't stand him. And I said, okay, so why are you telling me this? She said, I just recognized that I'm judging you, Dr. Matt, based on something inside of me. I said, see, now that's powerful. That's recognizing a hook that then causes you to see a situation in a different way. Because I'm going to rub some people the wrong way, and there's just nothing I can do about that. But if my tone of voice or something I say, if I say, does that make sense? And you hate the phrase, does that make sense? That's your own stuff. That's just words. There's no negativity behind it. But some people, they get flipped out of their mind. They come unraveled just because of something like that. So first thing you got to do is you need to find your hooks. And this could take some time. It could take a few days. If you go introspective, you could do it in a night. Or maybe you want to spend a week finding those hooks in person and discovering what they are and finding the overall pattern. Now, once you have those patterns, once you have the patterns that you're running, the next thing that you want to do is you want to make a list of the barriers that are causing you to not be able to create the change. Make a list of the barriers to you in creating change. In other words, is there anger behind it? Is there something that is in the person's tone of voice? Is it a trigger? Is it just something that is said, and if it's said the wrong way, or heck, if it's even just the words, does that make sense, for example, that sets you off? What is the barrier? If the barrier is within yourself, you need to identify that. What is the barrier to you creating change? Because I know you want to let this stuff go. I know that you want to be able to rise above it and have a different experience. And ultimately, you got to first discover what are the blocks inside. Now, you may discover with some of the patterns that the block is outside, that it's the individual. We'll talk about that in a moment. If the block is outside, we'll talk about what to do with that. If the block is inside, though, there's some specific tips. So you're really looking at, is there baggage that I have there? Is there some sort of specific trigger that's going on? Is there an emotional state that I'm getting into? Is there a connection that I have with one specific individual and it's just that individual? Or is it their stuff? Is it just their stuff and you don't feel a lot of charge on it? You don't feel a lot of anger, sadness, fear, or guilt. You're really just sitting there going, I think this is their stuff. Then great. At this point, you have the barriers. Now, I need you at this point to be honest with yourself. Here's what I mean by secondary gain, because it says right there, see if you have secondary gain. What do you get out of it? An example is that sometimes it's just easier to blame others for your stuff. And I say this from my heart. It is an easier path to blame others for your current situation. It is. It is a much easier path. And that is not the path of results. Are there situations that you can give me? And please, you don't need to put this in a question. Yes, I know that there are situations that you can bring up where I could say to you, in that instance, yes, you had to sue the person. In that instance, yes, that's unfortunate that occurred to you. I have met people that have gone through some of the most horrific things you can think of. And the ones that are empowered don't let what they went through make them become a victim. The ones that are empowered are the ones that look at what they went through and say, I learned a lesson from this. I learned a valuable lesson from it. And they don't allow other people's stuff, other people's experiences, or even their own experiences, give them an excuse to blame. Secondary gain is you're getting a benefit from having this barrier. Rather than dealing with an issue in a relationship, I was working with one of my clients and he had an issue in his relationship. And he was saying, every time my wife does X, Y, Z, this is what happens. And you want to know what? It's so much easier to say your partner has the problem. It is, because then you don't have to deal with it. Then you don't have to look in the mirror and face it. After talking with him for just a little bit of time, he realized that it would be an uphill, that it would require a lot of effort, and that ultimately he had to own the fact that he was allowing himself to get wrapped up in it, to get embroiled in it. Here's what I mean by that. If you react to a person in a certain way and blame them for your reaction, you're feeding the problem. You're putting energy, you're putting fuel on that fire. And I'm not claiming that what they did is right. I'm not claiming that what they did is wrong. What I'm claiming is that when you can just sit there and go, wow, I'm not getting plugged in. There's no hook. I've gotten rid of this barrier, that you actually reduce the negative reaction. So I did some work with him. And as I'm finishing up the work, his wife walks in and does the exact behavior. We're on the phone. His wife walks in and does the exact behavior. And he starts to laugh, not in a condescending way, just in a, wow, that's really weird. And he just turned to her, and I don't remember what he said. It totally defused the situation. And when she left the room, he came back on the phone, and he said to me, he said, in the past X number of years, I've never reacted that way. He said, I just literally brushed it off, and the situation didn't escalate. When you got a hook, and it's easier to say it's my partner's fault, it's my wife's fault, it's society's fault, it's my parents' fault. I don't remember where this saying came from, but I think it's a very powerful saying. We actually become adults when we stop blaming our parents for who we are. And I don't know what age that happened for you, or if you're still working on it. But the moment we stop blaming our parents for who we are today, that's the day we become an adult. And I'm sure that there are other things that go into that mix, but it definitely hits home this point that I'm saying. No, my mom wasn't perfect. No, my dad wasn't perfect. Well, you know what? They were perfect for what I needed in that time, and the lessons that I got now have allowed me to become an adult. That's why I don't have any charge on certain things. And it is more difficult to own it. It is more difficult to own it because I got to admit it's easier to just say, that person right there. If not for them, I would be one happy person today. I'd be one happy person this week. I'd be a happy person this lifetime, but it's that little, got to be willing to give that up. So if you find that that's a part of the problem, that you're not willing to give it up, We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll talk about what we're going to do next with that. Finally, what you're doing with this list is you make a list of what you want to do instead. You got to have an outcome. It's NLP 101. It's goal setting 101. It's never mind. It's success 101. You got to have an outcome. You need to have this idea of, okay, here's where I am. Here's where I want to be. Maybe it's just that you respond with a smile. Maybe it's you take a deep breath. Maybe it's you learn how to enforce your boundaries, because we'll talk about that in a moment, the need to enforce your boundaries. Maybe there's something that you have to do. Who knows what it is? But as you look at the list that you have all the things that trigger you and kind of grouped together in these themes. Then you have the list of, here are the barriers. Here are the things that are inside me or I'm experiencing with others that I need to resolve, and here's what I want to do instead. Now you have things to work on, and you have things that you're going to be aiming for. You have things that you want to achieve. And so this gives you an outcome. It needs to be a positive direction. I know that your baggage might be up at this point while you're doing this, but this is not the time for you to put down on your list, oh, that I'm able to get rid of this person and bury them in the backyard. I know that that might be an outcome that you want, and I know that that might be a fun thing to say, and hey, we can all joke around like that. But really, I'm looking for more of a positive direction, something that is self-initiated, self-maintained, something that you are able to do, that you are able to initiate and get going. So let's review big picture real quick. First of all, list, and on that list are your triggers, your hooks. Find if they fit into any specific categories. So you're working with maybe 3 or 4. Hey, if you're working with more, fantastic. You just got more stuff that you get to do. That's awesome. The next list is going to be what prevents you from letting that go. What is the barrier? I'm angry with mom. I carry fear. I blame others. Who knows? It's easier to do X, Y, Z. Whatever it is, be truthful with yourself. You're not sending this email list to me. You're not sharing it with your mom. This is for you. And so write it down. The more honest you are, then the easier it will be for you to change this stuff. Then the next thing is you make a list of all the things that you want to do instead. What is your outcome? What is your desired focus, your desired goal that you want to have? What is the specific behavior that you're looking for? And what is the ideal response in those types of situations? Hey, the third list might only be 1 or 2 things. You never know. But those are the big 3 things that you're doing. Now, let's talk about how to bust through the barriers at this point. Let's talk about how to bust through the barriers. I'm going to spend the most time on one, and that's because one requires a lot more discussion. The other ones are tools that you either already have or have an opportunity to get. So again, the tools are either things that you already have for those either practitioners, master practitioners. For those of you that have not done any NLP trainings, then we're going to do our best to give you an opportunity to get some of these tools. So the first one, busting through the barriers. What we're looking at now is busting through those barriers that are on list number 2. Now, before I go down this list, I want to be clear about something. Someone that I'm connected with on Facebook put this up there. I think it was absolutely appropriate. It had something to do with, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, but I don't remember who it was quoted from. I'll have to dig through and find it and then repost it on my timeline. It's so interesting that people desperately crave change, and yet when given an opportunity to create change, they only want to change on their own terms. The terms that they have been attempting to use to create the change in the first place. In other words, doing what you're already doing. And when I read that quote, it was a lot more eloquent than how I just stated it. I sat there and I went, oh, that's so true. I teach these NLP trainings, and we do our NLP trainings at a scholarship price of $97. 4 years ago, our trainings were $4,000, the exact same training, $4,000. And I have some people that come in and I'm talking about, here's how you create change in your life. Here's how you transform things that are going on. And I've literally had people walk up to me and say, but I don't want to do it that way. Well, how do you want to do it? And they tell me, and I would ask them point blank, do you already do it that way? And they're like, yeah, this is the way I do it. And, okay, well, it's the only Dr. Phil line that I like. How's it working out for you? And this aha goes off. And I've tried to explain to people for years that if what you're already doing isn't creating the change, it's time to change your approach to change. It really is. If what you're doing has not been working, then it's time to change your approach to change. That's what I want to share with you. I want to share with you some techniques for those of you that are new that you may not have done. And if you sit there and you go, but I want to do it a different way, if it's the way you've already been doing it, well, then you wouldn't be on this webinar. You would have figured it out. You wouldn't be worried about negativity. You'd be like, Dr. Matt, why do I need to know about this? I got it done. First one, easy, plain and simple. If it's baggage, if it's anger, if it's sadness, if it's fear, if it's guilt, if it's a limiting decision, if it's a major negative emotion, the release technique that we teach is called mental and emotional release. And that's a technique to let go of these big baggage that you have in your life. It's been researched clinically. It's been researched academically. I got a book that I'm working on. Oh God, Heather, if you're on this call, I know. I'm working. I promise. I got Huna coming up. I'm working on it. And we're going to get this book out. It's a research technique that Dr. Patrick Scott, who runs a clinic in Nevada, 3,500 active patients. He did it with clinical depression, 5 sessions, clinical depression at 0, gone. Clinical depression completely wiped out. If it can wipe out clinical depression, it can wipe out your baggage. And for those of you that have never had an experience of this, we're going to do a nice offer for you tonight so that you can have an opportunity to experience it if you so choose. If not, come to a practitioner training. We talk about it there. We don't get it done there, but we get through some other things. You've got to release the baggage. Anger, sadness, fear, and guilt has got to be gone. Because if you have a reaction to those barriers from anger, there's no amount of positive things that you can say in your mind that's going to get rid of that anger. You got to release it. The next one is, if you know NLP, it's called a swish pattern. If you know NLP and the trigger, it's something that someone does and it triggers you, then you want to do a swish pattern. Now, for those of you that have done no NLP, there are tons of books on NLP out there. And I don't like the title. NLP for Dummies is a decent book. Swish Pattern is in there. Talks about how to get it. You can order on Amazon. Most decent beginner NLP books talk about that. We teach it in our training. There's also a CD set, if you want to look online, that you can download. And I'm sure there's YouTube videos on the Swish Pattern. So you have the ability to get in control of that. Swish Pattern is if the barrier is a trigger. If it is something that hooks you, there's not a lot of emotion. It's just some behavior that someone else does that just throws you off, and you believe it's negativity, and you get that this is a person spouting off their negativity. And then what you do is you get the swish pattern in there, and it disconnects or undoes the trigger. The next one is if it's a mental focus. So you're not hooked. It's not baggage. It's just your focus seems to get derailed. Your theme is you just start looking at things as being the negative. The mental focus is the individual that looks for the negative rather than the positive, that looks for things to be bad rather than things to be good. Then what you want to do is you want to do a standard NLP reframe on that. Now, again, for those of you that have done NLP, you already know reframing. The really cool thing is, if you haven't done any of this before, our next webinar that we're going to do is going to be on NLP reframing. I'm going to just teach NLP reframing and teach you how to do it and give you a specific application for it. Go through the content like I would in a practitioner. In fact, I probably spend more time than I do in a practitioner training, because we got an hour here and I usually teach it in about 30 to 45 minutes. So we spend a lot of time talking about reframing. So if it's a mental focus issue, you need to have a different way of looking at it. So no baggage, no hook, a behavior that you want to get rid of. It's really just you're looking at the glass being half empty. The next webinar. So hang on if it's that. We'll get through that on the next one. If it is a person, if it is an individual that has you hooked, if it's an individual and it's a lot related to that person, then what you're going to have to do is the process called Ho'oponopono. It's what I did my dissertation research to become a doctor of psychology on, validated that the thing works, and been teaching it for years. We have an opportunity for you tonight to have a free experience of that. So if the hook is with an individual and you've done Huna or you already got this download, it's ho'oponopono. That helps you to disconnect from the individual in a positive way. It helps you to make a new connection with someone who you want to improve your relationship with. So if it's a person, then it's ho'oponopono. But there's one more category that we got to talk about, and that is action. So you've let go of the baggage, you've done a swish pattern, or maybe you don't need to. You've done reframing, or maybe you don't need to. You've done ho'oponopono. You are now clear as an individual. But this person is still spouting off around you. I'm sorry, and I try to put it as nicely as I could. Maybe you just need to tell the individual to zip it. There's no NLP technique for it. I apologize. If the person spouts off and it just doesn't work for you, sometimes maybe you just got to say to that individual, hey, this doesn't work for me anymore. There was a student of ours. Her name was Sally Bishop, and she used to teach at Huna. An amazing being. What a bright light, and such a big heart. And she passed away quite a while ago now. And I did trainers training with her. She was in my group at trainers training, and so this is a long time ago. And what a wonderful lady. No one's perfect. No one's perfect in this field. And I used to start off my trainings by saying, if NLP made you perfect, then there would be no things out there about Tony Robbins this, Richard Bandler that, Matt James this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can find negative things about people out there. And there were a group of students who left, and they were very grumpy with my father at that time. And Sally was around them, and they would talk in such a disrespectful way. And finally, Sally looked at them and said, I can no longer be around you guys. And they're like, why? We're just telling our viewpoint. You've done NLP, Sally. You've done Huna. You should be able to handle it. And she says, I can. I just don't need to. She had a beautiful saying. She would say, to forgive and to not forget is to never forgive in the first place. She had this just beautiful way of looking at the world, and that was, I don't need to be around this. I stopped watching the news a long time ago. If something happens, someone will tell me. My son on the way home yesterday told me that we're about to go to World War III. And I said, I've been hearing that since the 80s. Thanks for the update. He said, no, Dad. Now it's, it's the Ukraine and it's really going to happen. And this is, 2 days ago. And I said, Ethan, everything's okay, buddy. And he's like, well, how do you know? I heard the stock market crash today. I'm like, yeah, okay. So it didn't crash. It went down a little bit. And he's like, yeah, but this time it could be for real. And I'm like, okay, buddy. Let's just see what happens. So a day later, we're not going to World War III, apparently. Or maybe it'll switch back and we are going to World War III. Or maybe you have an opinion about it. I don't know. My point is that I don't watch the news anymore, and people will tell you when stuff are going on. So if you're worried that you're going to miss out on something, you're not. Someone's going to tell you, whether it's your son, your best friend, a partner. They're going to go, hey, buddy, did you hear the world's coming to an end? Sweet, I didn't, but thanks for letting me know. I'm just going to keep plugging along in my life as best I can. Sometimes you just got to tell these people that spout off all the time, I need to keep you a distance. I need to keep you away. And if you do it, though, I have it last on the list for a reason. Look, I'm not going to hide this from you. Like I said, you're going to encounter these people. These people exist in life. I want to give you some tools to help you out. These people exist, these individuals that spout off and say these things. You only approach that situation and take action once you've let go of the baggage, once you have let go of the hooks, once you have done ho'oponopono, then you take action. Because you got to take action from your heart. You don't start with the action. You release the baggage first. Because heaven forbid, what if it's your stuff? What if it's your stuff and you just don't know? So that's what you have to do. Those are the big picture. These are things that you're going to encounter in your life. Now, I want to help you out and give you some tools. What we're going to make available for you is a downloadable MP3 of Ho'oponopono. It is a recording from a live training that I did in Pembroke, Ontario, an amazing event, and it's becoming right with everyone in your life. It helps to reduce this grudge effect. And the other thing that we're going to do, and we'll send you a link for this, and this is totally optional, the Empowering Your Life CD set. It's a recording of how to let go of anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, all of these things, to be able to release those negative emotions. I think normally it's around $200. I could be wrong. Could be a little bit less, a little bit more. We're going to offer it to you guys as an MP3 download, which saves us money, for 49 bucks. It was a recording of a 3-day training. It comes with a manual, a PDF manual, all of the CD sets, $49 as an opportunity for you guys to experience this technique to let go of your anger, your sadness, your fear, and your guilt. And Chelsea's going to send along a link. There's going to be a follow-up email from this webinar for those of you that have attended. And I think the link is going to expire in a month. I think we're going to keep it available for you guys for a month. And then after that, we're going to shut it down. And so please forgive me if you're listening to this a month later than, what is this? March 6th. If you're listening to this on April 7th, then just look for the next webinar. We always do our best to give a little bit of an offer and something to give back to you guys. This is our way of giving back. Again, totally up to you whether or not you guys do it. Whether you want the free download, downloadable MP3 of Ho'oponopono, totally free. It's on me. It's my thanks for you being here. And the link will be sent to you by email. The Empowering Your Life MP3, $49, huge discount to give you an opportunity to experience this. And just to kind of begin to wrap up, and then I'll take some questions, that when I moved my kids out of the school and I was facing this negativity, I was so worried because I had, as a doctor of psychology, I had heard over and over again that moving a kid mid-semester is just awful, that you're pulling them up, you're uprooting them, and both kids had just thrived at this school that I so love. To this day, still love it. I'm still running the school. I'm still in charge of the board, not running the school. I'm in charge of the board. The head of school's running the school. And I was talking to one of my clients, and he said he had done some research that he used to work with schools, and he used to do a lot of coaching and whatnot. And he said, no, I didn't have a lot of negative emotions about it. I wasn't feeling sorry for my kids like they were a victim. I had the wrong focus. I had the wrong focus. And he looked at me, not looked at me, he was on the phone with me, and he said, look, I need you to understand something. When you pull your kid up in the middle of a semester and you put them in a new school, that teacher focuses in on your kid because your kid's new. The rest of the class focuses in on your kid because they're new, and they do everything they can, especially if it's in an independent school, in a private school, in a school that has that type of focus. They do everything they can to help this child integrate. He said, if you had pulled her up out of the school at the end of second grade and put her into a new school in third grade, that teacher looks at all the kids as being new, and the kids look at the whole experience as being new in a new classroom, and no one focuses in on your kid. No one focuses in on the new child to help them integrate. That's a reframe. Now, I'm sure there's research out there that can contradict that, but who cares? That became my mantra. That became my motto. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to be focusing in on. And I shared that with the kids. And Ethan loved it. And he's 14. Skylar, as a 7-year-old, went, yeah, Daddy, I already made new friends. And everyone wrote me a welcome card. And the teacher asked me how I'm doing every day. And I'm like, okay, well, then in my reality, it's real. That got rid of my hook. The negativity that I was experiencing became nothing after that, because you know what we're going to do? We're going to take the proceeds from what we're going to be able to sell, the land, the property, and we're going to create a foundation. And we're going to create a foundation that is going to absolutely help other kids get into independent schools, make a huge difference in their life. Children who otherwise couldn't afford it. And some people who are thinking of things as being negative now, sometimes you got to look at a broader picture. And I wouldn't have been able to done that if I hadn't let go of my negative emotions. I would have wanted to go back at these people who are saying horrific things about me and argue with them. And no, it's not my fault. It was managed for X number of years before. Let's blame the past head, the past board. None of that. I had no desire to do any of that because I'm seeing it for the positive. And I was sharing with you about my friend who would always call up and tell me about how bad things are. And I was on the phone with her one day and I said, I just want to talk about the positive every once in a while. And you know what she said to me? She said, you're the only person I can vent to. You're the only person that I'm able to express what's going wrong in my life. She said, I'm so sorry if you see that as me being negative. And honestly, for a moment, I felt bad. I went, I never looked at it that way. See, sometimes you're not seeing it in the right light. Sometimes the person who is sharing this negativity, maybe you are their only outlet. So we made an agreement that day. I said, when we talk, you can vent, and then the other half of the time, we get to talk about positive things. And if the whole conversation becomes a vent, we'll schedule a positive conversation later. And that's what we do now. And it transformed our communication and our relationship with each other. So, not sure if this is going to fix everything in your life. Here's what I do know. These tools will definitely help you out as an individual to gain a greater level of control. Might not make it perfect, but it'll definitely make it a lot better. And my daughter has a beautiful saying, and that is, you don't have to be perfect, you just got to do your best. So I hope that helped out. I did run a little bit long. You guys know me. I like to talk. I apologize for that. Let me put up the our Facebook page, and let me see if I can answer a few quick questions. First of all, wow, man, we have a great turnout with this group. Thank you guys for being here. I know if there's time constraints and you got to get going, then by all means you can. Let me just, a lot of highs here. Hey, Nadia, oh my gosh, we have someone on here all the way from Kuwait. That is badass. That is awesome. Thank you so much. Got some people in here. Tasha. The question has to do with PTSD. And Natasha, there is hope for that. I got to work with an individual, in the most recent one was in San Diego, and I did a demonstration, 45 minutes PTSD gone. It's coming out in my upcoming book. The mental and emotional release therapy is extremely effective for PTSD. It was actually approved for use in the Canadian military to treat PTSD. So there is hope. And yes, sometimes the negativity can come from deeper baggage, huge baggage, and I can absolutely appreciate that. Let me see if I can go through some of these questions. This has to do with communication. I've led 2 different companies now. As a hiring manager, I found that the lack of communication between accountability of upper management and the salespeople to be really frustrating. I used to do a lot more corporate trainings. And so corporations are a little bit of a different. Let me talk about it briefly. The first thing that you got to do is what I just went over in the webinar. You got to let go of your own baggage. You got to let go of your own stuff and approach it in a way that is most effective for the group. And if you have a position of authority where you can make change, then you will be able to make that change. If not, then sometimes you got to move on to a job that's going to be more productive for you, that is going to give you a more positive experience. And I know I see so many questions in here, and we're running short on time. So let me just see if I can find a couple more. Is counter transference included in the last concept? Marie, I believe if we're talking about the same thing, yes, then counter transference would be in there. From a Jungian perspective, though, even someone projecting onto you is still your projection. In other words, if you see someone else looking at you a certain way, that's your own stuff. And the test for me, and this is important for all of you that are still here, listen to this now. The test is, do you have an emotional response to it? Are you able to look at that person's behavior? That lady that came up to me and said, a certain behavior that you do, I don't like it. It reminds me of my boss. I had no charge on it. I just looked at her and I went, sweet, why are you telling me this? There was no hook there. And so if there's a hook, then my response can become that person's fuel and their then projection. And that's where you would get into that idea of countertransference. I know it's a huge topic in psychology. I studied it, and I look at it more from a Jungian perspective, that we each have our own projections. But anyway, I know we got a lot more questions, and I always like to make sure that I keep up with my time, and we've been going for just an hour now. Here's what I'm going to do with Chelsea. I'm going to pour through these questions, and if there's any that we can handle on the Empowerment Partnerships Facebook page, answer them. Maybe I'll write a blog about it. I'll do my best to get to these as best I can. And if I don't, you can always email the office. I can see if I can help you out in that way as well. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Look for the email from Chelsea from the webinar follow-up to give you the link so that you can download your MP3 and have that opportunity to get the Empowering Your Life CD set or MP3 set. And thank you all for joining me. I hope that you guys are here next time when we talk about reframing. And take care. We're having a beautiful sunset here in Kona, so I get to drive home with the sunset at my back. Take care. Aloha. Ahui ho. Class dismissed. Love you all. Bye-bye.